Have you ever looked at a watch and just thought, that looks like some other watch? I'm not talking about homage watches like Pagani's, made to resemble a Rolex, or a Michael Kors that's a mishmash of different Rolex watches. I'm talking about watches that seemingly have their own look but still resemble other watches. These are the kind of watches that I want to talk about today. Each of these pairs that I have, they have a unique story about why they look so similar, and they're not only interesting, but they also tell us a lot about the collecting passion that we all have for watches. The first pair of watches is based on a watch that was just recently released, which is the CW12, which I had some thoughts about in the video linked above. The comments you saw a lot, not only in my video, but all of the place, was it looks like a cheap version of the Czapek, a blatant copy, I'm disgusted. Or some variation at least. Lots of people noticed. Now, why is that? Well, here's the Czapek statement on who is credited for designing the Czapek. Adrian Buchman. Here's Adrian Buchman's LinkedIn profile. He was head of design at Christopher Ward from the time that CW started working on the 12. Same guy. Adrian owns a firm called Fusion that collaborated with Czapek on components on the Czapek, so it's clear that he had a role in both watches. Technically, Adrian doesn't get the literal credit from CW for the 12, but the fact is he was there since its inception. Whether he was the original designer of both watches like Gerald Genta was of the Nautilus, the Ingenieur, and the Royal Oak, I don't know. But the fact is he was involved in both. So this isn't a case of plagiarism. There's a reasonable connection. One commenter in my Christopher Ward video wrote, I cancelled my order of the Czapek. I don't want to be reminded of the fact that there's a cheaper version of my watch out there. I want mine to be original and unique. Well, something to that effect anyway, and I get it. If you are hoping to have a Czapek that looks like no other watch, then this might be a little bit frustrating. Personally, I think the 12 is huge value for money. It's a stunning design. CW has always been open about their inspiration and where it comes from, and in this bracket you get finishing and technique from CW, which is way above what you can usually expect. It's a great option, and it speaks to this cross-pollination that has been going on within watches since forever. The Royal Oak has been around since 1970. It's a Gerald Genta design, and if you today have a great relationship with your AP boutique, you can get it at retail starting at, the easy peasy price of $25,000. The Casio is $200. The Casio was released in 2019, and the product manager for the Casio was a guy called Junichi Izumi, and he stated that the inspiration for the watch was the DW5000. And you know what? Well, it is, because they both have an 8-sided bezel. The main difference between the Casio and the DW5000 is the symmetrical and equally sized individual sides of the 8-sided bezel. The Casio is totally its own design, and being an any-digital model in a primarily plastic, resin case, it has basically only the octagonal bezel as the shared reference point to the Royal Oak. It looks super cool on its own, and it's totally worth a buy, and a lot of people know this. And if you do want to mod it to look more like a Royal Oak, there are tons of modding options you can purchase online out there if you want to go down that road. So there's no deliberate reason for the visual similarities. Here, it's more a case of the watch community using the affordable and customizable nature of the Casio to build model Royal Oak beauties. Some of us only customize with a strap here and there, but for others in the community, modding, changing, and pilfering with your watch is at the heart of their passion. What if I told you that you could get a partial Lange and Sohne quality by buying a Glasshütte or even IWC? Chances are you won't believe me. Well, I'll prove it to you. This is the clasp on the Lange Odysseus. It's a deployment mechanism with quick release on the sides, but a mechanism where you depress the Lange logo on the clasp to activate the easy adjust mechanism. Totally cool, right? Integrated, seamless, and an absolute world-class quick adjustment mechanism. Now take a look at the CQ clasp. Same technique. Press the Glasshütte logo and you can quick adjust. IWC Pilot Mark 20 or the quick adjust bracelet for the Ingenieur, identical. Now who copied who? Nobody. Lange, Glasshütte, and IWC all sourced this bracelet mechanism from the same company. It's a specialist manufacturer called Brogioli. I don't know how you say it. They do specialized custom high-end bracelets and clasp mechanisms, and Lange and Glasshütte and IWC and probably a whole lot of others bought this clasp mechanism from them. The reason this example here is twofold. One, even Lange doesn't make everything themselves. We have this idealized and romanticized idea of some high-end manufacturers of watches doing everything in-house. But the fact is, almost everybody sources components. Rolex, Tudor, IWC, Patek, and Lange. Does this make Lange a worse product? Well, personally, I don't think so, but ultimately that's for you to decide. But definitely don't believe that they made everything themselves. Secondly, good mechanisms don't have to cost a fortune. And I think it's cool that IWC and others find specialists and say, make me the best damn clasp mechanism you can make, and get that quality into their watch. It's what makes affordable watches so damn good these days, because there is someone out there that can deliver components to makers like Christopher Ward or Bremont and others, so their individual offerings quality-wise are lifted above what you would expect from an entry watch 20 years ago. Tell me the Zenith doesn't look just a little bit like a Patek 5167. It's not an homage. It's not identical. There's inspiration there. The Daytona and the Chronomaster Sport, both 3 sub-register chronographs with ceramic bezels. I gave Zenith a pass when they launched the Chronomaster Sport. I saw resemblances to the Daytona, but Zenith I felt were their own brand, and I wouldn't go and say they were homaging or plagiarizing. To be totally frank, I don't think Zenith are blatantly copying, but Zenith has been moving their product lines towards less divisive designs. They're trying to put watches out there that are more broadly appealing, and the risk of that is that they have to be inspired by other watches and by watches that they know have design cues that are popular. This convergence on the safe space, I think, is what is driving those initial similarities. It's the same mechanism that drives the fact that all station cars or trucks from different manufacturers inevitably end up looking more or less the same. There's a risk in this because we all see many watches becoming more and more similar. There's less risk-taking and more aiming for the middle of the market. The risk is that things become not only derivative but boring. Not everybody is as blatant as Zenith, but Zenith, I have on my eye on you. In a similar vein, but not quite, is the Patek 6007G in the Calatrava line. Ostensibly, this is their dress line. You have the classic Clou de Paris, you have the base dress Calatrava, and also more field watchy, pilot-esque Calatrava. What the common theme of the Calatrava is hard to see already. And with this ultra-sporty 6007G, the Calatrava similarities are few and far between. The thing that the Calatrava 6007G reminds me of is the Nomos, both the Club Sport, but also the Autobahn. The reason, well, it's the rounded simple case with the small crown and the elongated lugs. When I first saw the 6007G in the metal, the first thing I said was, that's a Nomos. Not because of the dial. Nomos doesn't do dials with this much detail, but that case has more than a passing resemblance to the Nomos. What's happening here? Well, it's not copying. The 6007G has references to similar watches from Patek back from the 90s before Nomos was around, so it's not copying, it's not plagiarism, it's something else. Patek is trying to appeal to a younger, more modern segment of watch buyer. The Calatrava is the quintessential old rich guy's watch, and I think Patek are trying to figure out how to attract new customers with a different and more youthful offering. This 6007G is going to look like their interpretation of a cool person's watch, and that's why it's got cues that remind us of Nomos and the 1159, the Autodromo, and others. It'll be interesting to see if they succeed in moving in that direction, but the design cues are there because Nomos as a brand, as an example, have hit a design language that fits very well with a very young audience. And I think, not without going directly at Nomos, Patek are seeing those younger brands and saying, these are the inspirations that we need to include in our designs to make us more relevant for younger people. This is the Sinn 903 ST. This is the Breitling Navitimer. Copycat, homage. Likely a lot of you know, but some of you may not know, is that the Sinn is an almost carbon copy of Breitling, and they were allowed to do it. This is one of those interesting stories about the consequences of the quartz crisis in the 1970s. Breitling was one of the companies that was hit really hard, and they had to raise cash to basically solve some of their internal problems. And what did they do? Well, they sold the rights of the Breitling 806 and the 809 Navitimer models to Sinn. Sinn wanted to produce a pilot's watch. They wanted the logarithmic scale and slide rule function that made the Navitimer so recognizable. But the story's there. The time Breitling hit on hard times, and Sinn helped them out by buying the rights to one of their most iconic designs. Last 2 watches. AP released this watch, the Royal Oak Concept Spiderman. They're making a couple of hundred of them. The starting price is something like $200,000. There are 2 incontrovertible facts about this watch. It's going to sell out, if it hasn't already. It's ugly as, well, yeah, it's ugly. Why will it sell out? Well, because it's an AP Royal Oak. Because some people have so much money that they will have the money to buy this watch as an ironic purchase. Somebody is going to say, look at me, I actually bought this hideous thing because I could. There are also some Marvel fans out there, but I think most of them are buying this as an ironic purchase. Now, I know I may be hurting about 200 people's feelings right now, but they can dry their eyes on their gold laminated toilet paper on their 400-foot yacht moored somewhere off the coast of Lange. But there's a broader point that speaks to the Royal Oak concept Spider-Man, the Unico Big Bangs, the Rolex Jigsaw, and or the Omega Seamaster Jamaica. They're similar because these are marketing watches. These are watches that are built and launched to create hype, to be talked about in the press. Whether or not the consensus is that these are attractive or not is actually irrelevant for the conversation. Ideally, they should be as divisive as possible. It's their controversial nature in and of themselves that are the point. You can't escape the fact that we end up talking about these hideous watches. So when you ask yourself, why are they making these hideous watches from Omega or from Rolex or from AP? And some of them, you may like them. Some of you will maybe look at the Jigsaw and say it's a cool watch, but others will say it's ugly. They're doing it because you are ending up talking about them. That's the whole point of these watches. That's the similarity, to get you talking about them. Those were my copycat watches. There's probably more watches out there, and I'd really like to know, ignoring, of course, the true, Audemars watches like the Steinhardts and the Paganis and the like, which watches have those resemblances that once you see it, you can't unsee it. Let me know in the comments below. And if you know why the resemblance is there, then be sure to include it in the comments. That's all I've got for this time around. Like, subscribe. Cheers.